So it's wonderful to be together again to continue with this wonderful exploration of Tonglen in particular, one of the major bodhicitta trainings that's so dear to our hearts because it's a way to touch base with that bodhicitta that was just so beautifully described in the opening prayer. So last week, we began the 9 examples, actually the week before that, the 9 examples of Buddha nature. And the beginning of the Tonglen practice asks us to rest in openness or rest in nature of mind or rest in bodhicitta. And for a lot of people, that is one of the sticking points. You know, we barely can rest in shamatha. And so these 9 examples that we've been working with is a way of touching base with our Buddha nature and beginning to have confidence in it. All these beautiful descriptions help us understand why it is hard to see in ourselves and yet is there. And I think we've been studying bodhicitta and the kindness practice for, really quite some time now. So as we do, let's say, the loving kindness practice, and we give rise to loving kindness by visualizing something, you may find that after some time, you don't have to have an artificial visualization to feel like there's an internal little spring of bodhicitta that's there that just starts to quicken and moisten your pervasive mind-body continuum. And so that is one way that we can start to experience our Buddha nature as something that is reachable in terms of an experience, and we can begin to have confidence that the Buddha nature, given the right circumstances, will continue to grow. So the next series of examples particularly address this element. It's called the causal element. If we had no Buddha nature, then the Buddha couldn't awaken it, couldn't point it out to us. We could do all the exercises we wanted, and there would be no seed to expand. So this is why the next series of examples are important. It's because they address that seed that we have. So the first example of the causal ground is an underground treasure. And the example is of a destitute person who has nothing, who can't feed themselves, can't clothe themselves, is just excruciatingly poor, and is sitting in his or her shack, not realizing that under the house is a vast treasure. So he can't see the treasure. She doesn't know it's there, so there is no way to use that treasure. And the treasure can't say, I'm here, if you just dig, I'm here, everything is waiting for you, I'm here. So that is a little like the current state that we find ourselves in. There's a treasure underground. We don't quite know that it's there, and we're listening to the teachings of the Buddhas and Bodhisattvas because they are pointing out that if we start to work with it, that we can find that treasure. And they're saying, you can have confidence in this treasure. This treasure could have been buried 1 million years ago, and it may be buried very, very deep, but the treasure is there, and the treasure itself is lacking nothing. So it may be that it's covered up, but it is vast and has everything that's needed. Nothing needs to be added. Nothing needs to be taken away from the perspective of the treasure. it is changeless and perfect. And that is our Buddha nature. Even though we're only just beginning to have confidence, all along it's been changeless. Every single lifetime it's been changeless. No matter what we do, it is still there and it is changeless and it is perfect. So the next example is of a vast fruit tree. So if you think of the seed of a vast fruit tree, the seed, I've been cooking with peaches lately. So the seed of the peach is in the peach, right? And if I were to plant that seed, if I could provide all the necessary conditions, that seed could not be prevented from growing. It needs all the causes and conditions, but with the causes and conditions, it is indestructible, it is unstoppable, and it will grow. And so we can't see, when I'm looking at the peach seed, I can't see a peach tree, but that potential is in that seed, fully in that seed. And were it to be in the necessary conditions, then the shoot would grow naturally. It just would grow. And so when we think of, here we are, and we're listening to the Dharma, and we're meditating and really taking the Dharma and contemplating it, that shoot is growing, and it will keep growing in its own way, in dependence with the causes and conditions, until, you know, they call it the king of trees, is fully manifested. So it's unstoppable in its full manifestation. And then the next example is, by the side of the road, there is a statue made out of precious materials. You can imagine like a beautiful Buddha statue with, you know, gems. Sometimes there are gems in the base, or gems inside, or in the crown there might be gems. So there are all these gems, but it's wrapped in tattered, evil smelling rags. So a normal passerby will see that evil smelling, especially tattered rags, and they'll just pass by. It's like, you know, even revulsion. But a Buddha or Bodhisattva will see the Buddha statue within those tattered rags and immediately point out to the passerby, look, right over there is this extraordinary statue. And so that example shows how the Buddhas and Bodhisattvas, no matter who we are, no matter what we have done, always are able to see our Buddha nature, despite what the outer coverings are in and what the outer defilements are in. They're able to point the path to us and show us through the path how to remove the evil smelling tattered rags. So one thing you may start to notice is in these examples, the coverings are getting easier and easier to remove. So the treasure under the house, you might have to dig for a long, long time. So that's as we're, you know, in the beginning of the path, there's a changeless treasure covered by lifetimes of, you know, karmic imprints, yet it is there and unchangeable. And then in the shoots piercing the seed, now the seed is something that's more accessible. It just needs the right causes and conditions. It's propelling itself. And so that's an example of when we are further along in the path, we have experiences of moving beyond this sense of self and other into a sense of our vast interconnectedness. We might also say we might have a glimpse of the emptiness of an inherently separate existing self. And that glimpse doesn't make us automatically a Buddha, but our work on the path is to make firm that glimpse and develop it and sustain it. So our manifestation is propelling in a natural growing way, like the shoot growing and becoming fully manifest as a Buddha. And then the statue in the evil smelling tattered rags is more as we are further and further along in the path. There are still very fine karmic obscurations, that core belief and the core belief in a separate self still has some latent residue, but we're able to just easily shrug off those rags. It's something that's no longer difficult. It's you can imagine if you had a extra jacket on, you could just shrug it right off. So our obscurations are lessening. Our Buddha nature is en route. It is growing, manifesting. The potential is in the state of becoming until, finally we're just working with, very insubstantial and pliable kinds of mental obscurations. So that gives us confidence as well. And I'd like to just take some time this morning to just sit with this, to just sit with the remarkable teaching that we have a treasure inside, and that the treasure is growing. We are right at this very moment in a Dharma class. We're listening to the 9 examples from the Uttara Tantra, that is one of the key texts of the Mahayana. We have access to all of these teachers. And so, of course, it's not effortless from our side. We're providing the causes and conditions, but from the side of the Buddha nature, it has already started to manifest. It's, a little shoot that is pushing along into the sunlight, and starting to grow roots and branches until it becomes this vast, magnificent tree. And sometimes it's very difficult to switch our brains from that judgmental, I am bad, there's something wrong with me, I am not enough, to I am a treasure. I have a treasure. I am none other than that treasure. And it is about, have you seen those dogs that in the fall jump into the big pile of leaves? We can revel in the causes and conditions that allow that seed of Buddha nature to grow. So let's just see if we can take in our perfect Buddha nature that is in the process of becoming because of all of the actions we've been taking. So one of the cautions about studying Buddha nature is not to turn that into a different, better self. It is the joyfulness of how your equanimity and spaciousness of mind is connected to the Dharmakaya, is connected to the realization that the Buddha had, is connected to the realization that current teachers hold, that we can see and observe, of a vast, open, fearless, loving heart. So it's not a new self, but it is an inner recognition of this potential of the vast, loving heart that has always been there, that can encompass all that arises in an unchanging and fearless and welcoming manner. So you may start to be experiencing that quality of when you're resting in shamatha meditation and you have a sense of equanimity or the thoughts settling, that when there is a touching base with this confidence, you can see how that spaciousness is infused with bodhicitta. So there's a sense of the potential of the flavoring of bodhicitta, that the spaciousness is not inactive in the realization of a Buddha. The spaciousness carries the potential of all the Buddha activities, and we could say infused with bodhicitta. So let's touch base with this again and work with the same Tonglen instructions, and I'll give them ahead of time. So first is touching base with openness, your nature of mind, that vastness. The second is trying something very simple and very neutral that you would normally reject, like if the air were smoky or smelly or thick or dense, anything that you can imagine fairly easily. Like, for instance, people have allergies to some of the ingredients in incense. So you might breathe in starting to feel an allergic reaction. So anything that you can touch base with very easily, notice the shutting down of the spaciousness and relax and open again. So you're trying to see, in the most simple, neutral way possible, what is the opening and closing of your heart? How can you just see that moment because you want to learn about that? The third stage is connecting to a difficulty that someone dear to you is having in this moment, some situation in which you would naturally, oh, honey, if there's anything I can do to help, I just will give you anything. I'll do anything for you. I am here for you entirely. So that when you think of that situation, you think of the outpouring of bodhicitta as a natural reaction. Not think of it. You want to feel the experience of the outpouring of bodhicitta. And because we're human beings, even with people that are dear to us, you might see your bodhicitta wavering or your intellect interrupting, but I'm not sure if I can, it might be too much, etc. Again, you're trying to see what is that moment so you can learn about it. Learn about it, soften it, and allow it to come into the vastness as opposed to shutting down. And then the fourth situation is that's when you're going to the gym and you're ready for heavier weights. And you're thinking of, okay, this is what's happening to someone who's dear to me. Can I expand it to one more person who's experiencing the same difficulty? And as we grow in our heart mind, making it bigger and bigger and bigger. So you can just think of making it bigger in any way that your imagination arises today. So let's sit with each of these stages, knowing that we're trying to learn about open and close. We're trying to learn about how does our heart close, and how can we keep our heart open, even though we may have to have common sense boundaries. How can we keep our heart open? How can we see the pain of samsara in an open-hearted way, with a responding that's appropriate, but not shutting down our heart? So first, touching base with our open vastness, our Buddha nature, our bodhicitta. Now, sending and taking, breathing in the oily, dense, or odorous quality, something that's difficult to breathe in, and breathing out the fresh autumn air, sunlight, not getting hung up on your imagination, just very simply. Breathing in without rejection, breathing out with offering. Now the situation that's close to your heart, opening and breathing in, accepting, lifting in your imagination the suffering and sending as an offering what's needed. And then making it bigger. So I love my gym teacher. She's a multiple cancer survivor. And so we can't complain and whine too much because she's our age and she's been through a lot more. But what she's always saying is it's not about the amount of weight, it's about doing exercise really smartly. So that's what Tonglen is. We really want to understand the purpose. We're seeing when our heart starts to shut down, and we're seeing that there is connected to the heart shutting down a fearfulness, and it's a fearfulness for the sense of I that we've created and needing to protect that in some way. And so we're learning about that very moment of the shutting down. We're learning that there's a vastness and there's a different not vastness that is this shutting down. And so we're trying to play with that border and look at and be able to take in the suffering of others in an ever-growing capacity. At the same time, we're looking at if the situation is near and dear to us, there's a natural arising of compassion and bodhicitta. So we have that capacity within. So we're trying to see even within that, we can see the border and the shutting down. So it's learning about in a really direct feeling kind of way. I have vastness and I am fearful. And I want to put my allegiance with the vastness, not the fearfulness. So one of the most important teachings in this kind of area of teaching is by Zigor Kantro Rinpoche, because his sense of when he's teaching Westerners, we get to that borderline where that's actually the most productive place, where we can see, oh, okay, my heart is shutting down. I can relax. I can remember the vastness. I can sustain it, and I can push it a tiny bit more. Instead of doing that, we meet the border of my heart is shutting down. I'm bad. I can't do this right. I'm a terrible person, even with this person that's close to me. I have limits. There's limits to me. I'm bad, bad, bad. And so that's really so unproductive. He said that this guilt quality that is so quick to arise in our culture is essentially it's aligning with our ignorance when we could be aligning with our Buddha nature. And he's encouraging us, don't go there. Return to confidence in the treasure. Go there. Yes, for a minute, I put that evil smelling, black, tattered, dirty robe on again, and I'll just shrug it off. Right? The point is the treasure, not the covering of the treasure. Okay, so we have some time for discussion. I'll change it to the gallery view. Pema Chodron says, our culture excels at guilt. It's our cultural neurosis. So what's your sense about these examples, about learning? What are you learning this morning in your experience of the Tonglen? It's really a fun practice.
So I'll go.
Okay.
Hi, I just wanted to say, when my teachers first pointed the path out to me. They brought me to see Pema Chodron. And it's your first retreat. My mind was blown. And the one thing I heard and carried with me was, you are a jewel. And no matter how much dirt gets piled on you, you're still that jewel. Pema said that, and that it was toward the end of the retreat, and that always has stuck with me. And I just love this notion, how everything is coming together, sharpening the focus and noticing that little moment where we forget that. And that space actually has time enough for us to come back to that belief that jewel is there and that we are that jewel. So anyway, this has been really fun.
And so I'm just going to stop here so we have privacy and do a dedication and stop the live stream. So bodhicitta, excellent and precious mind. Where it is unborn, may it arise. Where it is born, may it not decline, but ever increase higher and higher. Okay. Other folks.